I do want to thank you all for coming out to the roundtable for CNY on affordability today. It means a lot that you showed up, and I want to just basically facilitate a conversation. So I'll go around the horn and allow you to say your piece. If you can keep it, within a reasonable amount of time, that'd be good. But please get some things off of your chest that you brought to the table here today, and then we'll open it up and we'll talk about some of those ideas. My goal here today is to take these ideas back to the halls of Albany and try and make some common sense and some good policy out of them. And by focusing these roundtables in different areas across New York State, we're able to really focus in on some of the affordability and nuanced issues that Central New York and the greater CNY area is having on affordability. And I know you all share some of those concerns, and that's why you're here today. So thanks. And we've got Randy Wolken from MACNY. Always great to see you, Randy. We've got Bill Brower, who is the Director of Public Policy and Community Impact of MACNY. We've also got Christina Hudson-Kohler, President of the Onondaga County Farm Bureau. We've got we don't have Alex Walsh from the Northeast Dairy, but I'm pretty solid. I'm from dairy country on dairy issues. David Manzano, Senior Vice President of the Greater Syracuse Association of Realtors. Great to have you with us today. And we swapped in Jared Burns as well. We've also got Alberto Bianchetti, the Regional Director of External Affairs at National Grid, and Kevin Schwab
with Center State. Thanks for having me.
We've also added Dan Barnaba, a CNY builder, and it's great to have you all here today. So maybe, Dave, can we start with you, and that'll keep it easy for me. We'll go right around the horn.
Sure. Once again, Dave Manzano Sr. I'm with the Greater Syracuse Association of Realtors. I'm also an associate broker with My Town Realty, so I guess I can consider myself a working president, definitely involved in the trenches. I want to thank you, Senator Walczak, Town of Clay, for putting this on, and distinguished panel members. Thank you for allowing me to be here. What keeps us up, again, affordability with housing and market stock, as far as the ability to actually have homes in inventory. So just a few quick things I'd like to go over and concerns. This is the year-to-date median sales price from January 2024 to December of 2025. In January 2024, the median sales price was $226,000. As of December 25, it went to $250,000. That's a change of plus 10.6%. That's $24,000 increase in the price of a typical home in 1 year. Buyers need significantly more income to qualify for the same home that they did last year at this time. The year-to-date average sales price in 2024 was $266,815 versus 295,745. That's a plus 10.8% increase. The average price is rising slightly faster than the median. Upper-end sales are pulling prices up, even though affordability is tight for most buyers. On the Housing Affordability Index, year-to-date, 2024, it was at 171, and 2025, we're at 164. That's a change of a minus 4.1%. A lower index means a typical household has less income relative to what's needed to buy the median price home. Despite one slightly better month in December, the affordability was worse overall last year. Inventory. Homes for sale in December of 2024, we are 1,010 versus 2025, we're 1,287. That's a change of a positive 27.4%. So that's a good change. The month's supply of inventory for 2024 was 1.5 months of inventory versus 25, 1.9. Again, a positive, but here's the however. Prior to COVID, we ran at least 3+ months of inventory. So we're still far behind where we should be. Our pending sales for December 2024, we were 423 versus December of 2025, 293. That's a minus of 30.7%. Year-to-date pending sales essentially were flat. The year-to-date closed sales were plus 1.1%. The days on the market for 2024, 23 days versus 2025, we are at 25, so we're slowly increasing. However, as I had mentioned to you, Senator, the cream puffs still get multiple offers. They're going over list, and they're going roughly 8 to 10 days.
Dave, what's a cream puff?
A cream puff would be something that's in extremely good condition, needs little work, and is in a very desirable area. So my takeaways, home prices rose 10 to 11% in 1 year. Affordability declined 4.1% year to date. This is a supply and demand issue without a doubt. The lower the supply, the higher the demand, the higher the prices go. We absolutely need to get our inventory up, especially for first-time home buyers. We also need better tax incentives and options for seniors, like myself, and empty nesters, like myself, to leave their nests, which will open up a more desperately needed housing stock. We need to work with our builders and developers in efforts to streamline permitting and accelerate approvals. We need zoning reform for more housing types, allowing duplexes, triplex townhomes, and multifamily buildings in more neighborhoods. And we need to stop with the NIMBY attitude, not in my backyard. We need to look towards public-private workforce housing partnerships that would require or incentivize micron and large employers to workforce housing, housing vouchers, or even employer-assisted down payment programs as part of a community benefits agreement. We need to target construction costs, offsets that are tied to codes, seek state and federal grants to offset the incremental costs of new energy and safety code compliance for affordable projects, i.e. sprinkler systems. I'll let Dan get into that. We need to preserve existing affordable housing stock, expand housing trust funds, and use pilot programs smartly, grow local housing trust funds, and consider payment in lieu of tax of targeted tax incentives tied to long-term covenants. We need to be conscious of our workforce development for construction trades, especially apprenticeships for upskilled programs to grow the local construction workforce. If we don't have the skilled workforce for our new construction and for our builders, we will suffer the cost that'll even go higher than they are. So.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Jared, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I think Dave did a fantastic job in putting down all the arguments that I have on paper here, but I'm just going to agree with a lot of what he said. But I'd like to first just take an opportunity to thank you, Senator Walsett, for having this discussion. I'd like to also thank the town of Clay. My name is Jared Burns. I work in government affairs for the New York State Association of Realtors. We're based in Albany. We're a not-for-profit trade association representing just about 60,000 real estate professionals across the state. Our members utilize their expertise to help individuals and families navigate that complex real estate transaction when buying and selling a home. And oftentimes this is the largest single investment of their lives. And unfortunately, that this road to home ownership is how we see it becoming more difficult and out of reach for too many New Yorkers. That's middle income, lower income, first-time home buyers, and many of these barriers are the effects of New York's historic housing inventory shortage that David mentioned, something that we're all aware of here throughout the state and feeling. Home sale prices have increased 29 consecutive months. It's 2.5 years of just steady increasing in that price, and we're seeing this trend across all regions of the state. Tight inventory, high real estate taxes, property taxes, mortgage recording taxes, real estate transfer taxes. There's many taxes when you're buying a home and selling a home. What we see are the primary driving factors. Housing has obviously been a focal point over the last several years in Albany, and we think that's a good thing. And there has been investment and growth. But not at the pace needed for meaningful impact, in our opinion. More must be done in order to provide the housing opportunities that New Yorkers need. NYSAR believes that collaboration with industry experts is necessary as we look to policymakers for a balanced solution to get our state back on track. Realtors believe that SECRA reforms is a positive step to help streamline that lengthy and expensive process of developing more housing. However, we also believe that there are additional regulations that continue to put up barriers to developing much-needed housing, like the newly expanded state freshwater wetlands regulations, the pending All-Electric Buildings Act. So we need to be incentivizing. We feel that New York State should be incentivizing more housing development, not creating more obstacles. And realtors recognize the importance of environmental preservation and reducing carbon emissions, but the overly broad nature of some of these regulations and the pace in which New York State set for its climate goals, we feel is problematic in the real world when its overall stated goal is to increase housing supply and make housing more affordable. So I just want to quickly turn to first-time home buyers. I want to mention that nationally, first-time home buyers now make up just about 21% of the market. That's the lowest share since 1981 when realtors began tracking this data. And the median age of first-time home buyers has climbed to a record 40 years old, up from your late 20s in the 1980s. So this delay in home buying will have a long-term effect on not only the folks here now, not only this generation, but likely generations to come, because as we all know, home ownership is tied to generational wealth. And this is putting young people at an unfortunate disadvantage. And in light of this, realtors have been strong supporters of a bill that would create a first-time home buyer savings account program that would allow individuals and families to take a state income tax deduction on certain deposits into a designated savings account that could be only utilized to purchase a first home. So that bill originally passed both houses back when Senator Betty Little was the prime sponsor. Unfortunately, that bill was dismantled in a chapter amendment, and it's currently sitting now in Senate Finance. And so just to conclude, solving the state's housing crisis isn't going to happen overnight. You can't turn it on a dime, but we're hopeful that meaningful discussions like the ones we are having here today and like you've had previously throughout the state will help provide that valuable feedback so that folks in Albany may take a more balanced, thoughtful approach when deciding the state's future housing policies. And of course, I don't want to say that everything is bad. New York State is a desirable state. Folks want to live here. They want to stay here. I think we just need to do, more to incentivize folks to stay here. I want my kids to stay in New York State, which is what I think, all of us want. So again, I appreciate you having these discussions.
How old are your kids, Jared?
I have a 15, 17, and a 6-year-old. So quite the gamut.
Yeah, almost ready to fly though.
Yeah. So college, looking at SUNY colleges.
Yeah.
And you just want to keep them here. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-month-old.
Okay,
So we're not quite in the same season of life yet.
that's a busy
But,
time.
I share the same sentiment as I know everybody does. If I could turn it to Randy to lead off for the Manufacturers Association of Central New York.
Well, thank you, Senator, for having this conversation. It's always a pleasure to join you. Really, a little bit about MACI. So for those who may not be as familiar with us, we are the state's largest manufacturing association in 26 New York State counties, upstate, represent over 200,000 employees amongst MACI membership itself. And on top of it, I'm president and CEO of the Manufacturers Alliance of New York State, which is a collection of manufacturing groups across the state representing nearly 450,000 plus manufacturers throughout the state of New York. And people often forget New York State's a top 10 manufacturing state. Continues to be a real workhorse when it comes to manufacturing. And I believe, you and I have talked about, and many have talked about, this is manufacturing's moment in New York State. Some of the largest investments in the country are being made now, and have just started not too far from here, related to both the Micron ecosystem, which is being invested in, and then literally billions of dollars of other New York State manufacturers that are investing across the state. So we have this unique opportunity to really focus on being the 21st century place to make things, not only for the country, but globally. If we're in the manufacturing moment, which I'm convinced we are, I believe we can jump into a top 5 manufacturing state if we continue to making sure that this is the place that companies want to grow and invest. It's important that we look at things that keep us globally competitive, because it really is a global world that we're living in related to manufacturing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about tax policy, and a little bit about investment here, energy, workforce investment, overall affordability, and then close out with just a couple comments. First and foremost, it's really important that we lean into investing in really encouraging investment. These are massively important capital projects which are coming, and more importantly, are already existing. So we need to not decouple from the federal government when it comes to the R&D and capital investments. So it's important that when you look at that, that's really investing that can be deferred. Quite frankly, we need to stay united with the federal government on this so that we don't create a disincentive to invest here vis-a-vis other states. So that's one of the areas that we'll be talking throughout the coming year, and we want to continue to see us stay coupled when it comes to investment. Again, it's not just deferring investment. We could literally lose investment if we uncouple from the federal government. Let's just move right into speed of investment. The reality is we need to be a place that's attractive for investment. You've heard on the housing side, how do we become an attractive place to build housing? I'm very encouraged by that conversation about changing the secret process around housing. We think that should be extended to many other areas because we need to be a place where we can make investments, where companies, individuals, organizations can make investments. So we'd encourage the reform of regulatory requirements that really slow the process. Obviously, those processes still need to focus on environmental quality and so forth. We don't want to give up any of that, but we think that's absolutely critical to lean in on regulatory reform. The next major issue, and I see real leadership both from you, the Senator, as well as many others, the governor, her team on the energy side, to focus on all the above strategy for energy. We need the ability to have enough energy for the investments. We'll need all the current forms, and then we're already focused on new nuclear, which would be a tremendous advantage to both this region and many parts of New York State. So all the above approach in energy, continuing to make sure energy is affordable, available, reliable, and actually has diversity in content in terms of delivery. These are things that we've been advocating for decades, and it has never become more important on the energy front. We think the new nuclear approach, both nationally and within the state of New York, goes a long way to helping do that. Obviously, it's really important that we have a workforce, a highly skilled workforce. So it goes to affordability. I'm glad already housing was talked about. But when a worker moves here or stays here, or residents want to be in New York, they care about the cost of living. So housing, childcare, just everyday commodity prices, those are things which are really important, and we care about those because those are not only workers but residents throughout the community. We also believe, and I know the Senator, you've talked about this as well, investing in skills growth. We have to have the highest skilled workers in the country, I would say globally. So we're at the forefront of registered apprenticeship programs that you're aware of, as well as pre-apprenticeship programs and career awareness. We need to invest not only in the housing space, obviously construction, building trades as well, but across the spectrum and making sure we have the highest skilled workforce. And those individuals continue to stack those credentials and continue to be the most skilled workforces anywhere in the country. And let me just close by saying, let's not miss this moment. We're uniquely gifted with the opportunity for billions upon billions of dollars of investment. What we need to do is be that state where people want to invest, both at the personal level as well as at the corporate level. We want existing companies to stay here and grow, and we want future companies to come here. So affordability is at the top of the list when both companies and individuals make decisions, and I think that's why we have to focus on it.
Good. Thanks.
You bet.
All right, Bill.
Good morning, afternoon, everybody. Good to be here with Randy. I'm Bill Brower of the Manufacturers Association. Randy said a lot right there. I just want to add a couple things. He was talking about workforce, and I think that workforce is central to this moment, and I think education and training is central to workforce. So MACNY and others have developed workforce training programs like the Real Life Rosies program. I've got a little Real Life Rosies button, Randy does as well. And when you think back to what the country needed in World War II
Did you know
as...
that Rosie the Riveter is alive and lives just outside of Albany?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Yeah.
That's great to know.
No
Randy
sweat.
may have known that. Randy did, I didn't. Well, thank you. But when you think back to World War II and the way it was all in for that effort to win the war, this manufacturing moment, this moment in New York State, and especially here in central, western, upstate New York, is an economic moment where we need as many of our neighbors to have the opportunity to get the training and develop the skills so they can be employees at the companies that are here and are coming, so they can buy the houses, so they can buy the energy, so they can consume the farm products. They have to have jobs. So we think it's incredibly important to give people the opportunity to gain the skills, to get the jobs they need. And oftentimes, we're going to need people whose families have not had the kind of manufacturing jobs that are coming. So there is the need to partner with organizations in the community to identify people who can go through programs like Real Life Rosies, advance to apprenticeship, then go into registered apprenticeships and high-paying jobs so they can support their families. So I just wanted to put a fine point on that.
Great. Kevin from Center State?
Senator, thank you, and thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you certainly for inviting us. It's an incredibly important topic. I'm going to start from the moment that we are in, though, that a couple of folks have already alluded to. We're in a moment of growth, and that feels really good after generations of not really being able to say that, whether it's the population here, whether it's our economic growth, whether it's a growth in expectations that we're finally starting to see from folks who have endured, frankly, decades of stagnation or even loss. So we are moving from, and our government should move from, a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance, and how do we support that growth? We've gone from stagnant to a point where I'm a little afraid to use this word, but we're almost booming here. People don't realize it, but we were among the top 10 among medium and large markets in the U.S. last year for economic performance as it related to both employment and GDP growth, regional GDP growth here. And we're at the front end of this curve right now. So the big challenge is to say, we can't screw this up. And yet we see that there are some sort of headwinds baked into our system. And that's where this turns to the affordability message here. Growth brings new pressures, beyond the pressures that we're seeing around the state and the nation right now, in terms of cost and affordability. Add on the layer of what we're going through right now, and we have the real potential to watch costs spiral out of control here if we are not careful, and we're already a high-cost environment. I'd mentioned to you, we're never gonna be a low-cost state. Like, I mean, let's just, let's be realistic about that.
But we could be lower.
It would be nice not to be 50th on the tax list. Yes, you're exactly right. But the reality is, there are things that we need to do to make sure that we are providing value in this state, and workability and predictability to the people that we are looking to have invest here, whether it's in housing, whether it's our infrastructure, whether it's energy, which has already been talked about, and talent and workforce and needs for childcare, needs for new hotel development here, schools, right? New approaches and new infrastructure here. All of these things tie together into this moment. And each requires its own strategies and solutions, but they all have a common thread, and that means we need more. We need more of all of these things. More is going to meet the demand, but more will also be the answer to the affordability puzzle. Where you have more housing, you have control over growth and costs in housing. And you can apply that really to every issue area that we're facing right now. If I just focus right now on one of them, housing, for example. You heard, I think, a wonderful description of a lot of the taxes and fees that are associated with the development of new housing in New York. What is an even bigger cost and an even bigger ding on affordability, there have been a number of studies that speak to this, are all of the hoops that you have to jump through, the hurdles that you have to clear. Pick your favorite metaphor. There's got to be one associated with the Winter Olympics that I'm not thinking of. That delay and add cost and layers of red tape to meeting that more in housing in every one of these areas that we're speaking to. I'm looking at our internal dashboard right now on projects that we're tracking in the area. These are typically multifamily housing, which we're going to need to be a sizable piece of the new housing development that we have here. Right now we're tracking 89 projects in the pipeline in central New York, worth more than 4.8, almost $4.9 billion. And these are projects that are in various stages of development. I can tell you that every one of those 89 projects has had a cost inflating delay. Every one of them. Some of them have been painfully long delays. Projects that could have been in the ground a year ago that are now still waiting because of issues that they're dealing with the DEC. Local zoning issues. You heard about the NIMBY factor. Certainly if you say wetlands to somebody right now, and oh, by the way, we're in central New York, we kind of have them everywhere.
It rains and snows here.
The lack of certainty, right? At the beginning of last year, we brought into effect new wetlands regulations where you can't even look at a map to say, is there a wetland on the property, right? And so you have to go through an opaque process that is going to add time and cost, and every project has now got multiple consultants and multiple engineers and to deal with all of these issues. So yeah, we're never going to be a low-tax state, but it would be awfully nice if we could say, what are we getting? What's the value? How are we helping these projects along? How are we meeting the more that this community is going to demand? And frankly, we're just at the front end, I think, of what you're going to see in other parts of upstate as well, and a lot of what the city downstate has had to deal with. Solving that conundrum, even a little bit, goes a long way to making this a place where we meet this moment that we're in, and we in fact can become an example for others in the state and the nation.
Good, thank you. Dan?
Thank you for having me, Senator.
A lot of people touched your lane already
We
here
did.
today, so I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
I'm following a great
Yeah.
company. I've heard some great things. Let me speak to Dave and Jared. I think they touched on a lot of interesting points, valid points about existing housing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about new construction, land development. I'm a residential land developer of single-family and occasionally multifamily housing, but predominantly single-family housing. And let me start by saying that and my experience after about 30 years is really frontline experience. I'm at the local municipalities, I'm dealing with the county, I'm dealing with the state, I'm dealing with all these regulatory moguls, the skiing reference, that I have to deal with to create my product. And it is a challenge. But the biggest challenge I have is they say, well, you build new houses. There can't be anything affordable about what you do. And these are luxury items. When you're buying a new home, you're buying a luxury item. But what people don't appreciate, perhaps people even down to the local level, is that housing is a pyramid. It's a structure. And if you don't create opportunity at the top, which might be at the highest price points, maybe not the first house you buy, but an opportunity for somebody who aspires to have a new home, a new product to buy, you create opportunities below that. And I think Dave and Jared will tell you that the bidding wars we've seen, the pricing pressures that we've seen on existing houses has had a lot to do with the lack of supply. And if we just open up the supply of these houses, it will take pressure off that pyramid so people will be able to afford that first house. I think a lot of people don't quite realize that the number one means of acquiring wealth in our country has been and probably always will be home ownership. And people need to aspire to home ownership, and we should drive that age down and show this younger generation that they can afford these homes. I want to speak to, first of all, the workforce. I'm not going to be able to create my product at a lower price by convincing the people who sell me goods and services to do it at a lower price. It's not going to happen. So that's not where we're going to create downward pressure on the price. It's going to be the regulatory burden. It's going to be the obstacles. It's going to be timing. Timing costs us a lot of money. It's going to be financing opportunities, the soft costs associated with what we do, and it'll be the land use. It doesn't take much to look back at what was done when this region grew rapidly in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and you saw lot sizes that were about 1/10 of an acre. We built out our villages, we built out the inner circles around the city, and we had very small home sites, and those home sites were just fine for families that were starting out. And then we sprawled, and we moved out, and we developed estate lots, 1/4 acre, 1/3 of an acre, 1/2 acre, 1 acre lots, and people began to think that was the norm. And they got out of the mindset of 2-family homes or 3-family homes or small single-family homes, what might you find in Eastwood or in Mattydale or in Galeville or in some of the surrounding areas. And we're trying to go back to that product, and we're trying to show town leaders, local leaders, county leaders, that there's a demand for that product. If you let us build it, people will buy it. It will be a home ownership opportunity that not only will let them in the door to these products, but they'll admire what we were able to create for them and give them an opportunity to buy. I think what's sort of lost on what I do for a living is that building homes and what I do is also architecture. And architecture is culture. There's an art to what we do. And I would like to think that as we invite all these people into our area, into our region, and we show them where they can live, we can show them that we can give them the culture that they want. That they don't want to just look at the existing stagnant inventory that we've had in this market for the last 40 years and say, is that all I have to choose from? Maybe I'll go someplace else. We have an opportunity to show them that we can deliver great architectural opportunities. When I speak to the architecture, it's not just the home construction itself, but the assembly of the community. Now, myself and my peers in my industry, I'm a member of the State Home Builders Association as well as the local Central New York Home Builders Association. We have a lot of opportunities that we would like to show people what we can do. And if some of the towns and the county give us the opportunity to do it, they'll see it sprout. They'll like what they see, and hopefully they'll let us proliferate what we do. Thank you very much for letting me share my thoughts. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding new construction and land development.
Thanks, Dan. Alberto, maybe 9 out of 10 phone calls to my office, as you can imagine, are about utility costs. What do you bring for us today? How can we solve it?
Sure. I wanted to, Dan put a smile on my face because as he was talking about it, I was thinking about the inventory of homes that I've lived in, right? And I'm a son of Eastwood. I grew up in Eastwood. I lived in Eastwood for the first 25 years of my life. I didn't know I had a small house, right? But I had a park to go to. I had a school that I could walk to. I had safe streets, and so those are so relevant.
You had a reservoir to sled down?
Yes, exactly right. Over right at Sunnycrest Park, right down the road at Henniger High School. And this would have been a good week, or last week would have been better. But either way, you're right, Senator. You're not alone. I'm sure you realize that in terms of the traffic that people are getting and we're getting as well regarding a utility bill. So I'll be happy to talk about those for a minute. First, talk about one. Of course, thank you for convening us, and thank you for everybody who's participating at this roundtable. A couple numbers. The first number probably isn't too much of a surprise. The second number might raise some eyes. National Grid has 10,000 employees in New York. We are a major employer and a major constituent of all the lawmakers throughout upstate New York, from Buffalo to Montauk. And as such, we realize that we play a role not only as utility, but as an employer. The next one that was spoken of briefly here, we pay $1 billion a year in property taxes. $1 billion, right? Is there value there? That's what we've got to recognize, is that we pay $1 billion a year. We're the biggest property taxes where you're sitting right now, thanks in large part to that beautiful substation that's about 2.1 miles down the road that created the opportunity to bring Micron here. And so let me talk a little bit about speed to market, because that's really what we've been talking about in a roundabout way when we talk about regulatory reform, when we talk about land use. We really have to talk about speed to market. And we've talked about how difficult it is. If you think it's hard to build a housing development, which it is, try to build a transmission line. That's my only counterpoint. If you think it's hard to build apartments, try to build a substation. And so all of that is part of the fabric that we need to drive our economy. And at National Grid, our responsibility goes beyond delivering energy. We're committed to keeping it accessible and affordable for families, small businesses, and communities across central New York and upstate New York. Today, we face rising energy demand, evolving policy expectations, and growing pressures on household, municipal, and business budgets. Many of our customers, as you mentioned, Senators, are making tough choices, and we're working with our regulators to make difficult decisions ourselves, and affordability is at the heart of how we plan, invest, and operate. Much of our network was built decades ago. Sally Labrera did an interview that's in the Syracuse.com that you're going to read, and she was asked what was the one lament, one thing she could change about upstate New York, and she said she wishes our infrastructure wasn't 60, 70, 80, 100 years old. That's water, that's fresh water, that's wastewater, that's the natural gas infrastructure and the electric infrastructure. So it demands investment. And while we're maintaining the grid for more capacity, flexibility, and resiliency, upgrading infrastructure is essential for safety and reliability, especially during severe weather, and these upgrades are a major driver of rate increases, separate from the clean energy mandates what we're hearing about. We have a rigorous and transparent rate process. Every dollar we request is scrutinized by the Public Service Commission, consumer advocates, customer representatives, and stakeholders, including members of Center State CEO, members of MACNY, and realtors. We must clearly demonstrate why each investment is needed and how it benefits customers, whether through improved reliability, enhanced safety, or preparation for future growth and electrification. Affordable, reliable energy is a catalyst for opportunity. It supports job creation, attracts investments, and strengthens communities. We're committed to a cleaner energy future, coupling renewables with strategic investment in our networks, including a gas infrastructure to maintain reliability and prevent price volatility. And affordability isn't just about infrastructure, it's also about people. Our teams and consumer advocates work directly with customers to help them manage bills, understand energy use and access support programs, from energy efficiency initiatives to flexible billing, targeting assistance for vulnerable households. We're focusing on giving customers the tools they need and the choices they deserve. National Grid is committed to an affordable, reliable, and transparent energy future. We're committed to working with you, Senator, the legislature, and the governor to adopt policies that are holistic, grounded in transparency. We could talk a little bit about transparency in our bill in a minute, and focused on the true cost drivers across the system while keeping the regulatory compact in place. We're ready to be a constructive partner in delivering those real results for New York families, municipalities, and businesses. We're not just an energy company, we're part of the communities we serve. That's why we're here having this conversation today.
Thank you. Christina, representing the leading industry in New York State. There's a lot of different ways to term that. But absolutely, our number one industry, agriculture. What's going on with affordability in ag prices in Onondaga County?
So I come to you as my day job as an egg farmer. So I'm very nuanced in the affordability of eggs that has led the discussion. But
Good. I don't think any other roundtables covered egg prices yet.
It's just agriculture in Onondaga County and New York State is so diverse, and that's one thing that makes it a strength. But with diversity comes a lot of competition. And Onondaga County agriculture is facing pressure for efficiency, land stewardship, labor, automation, infrastructure, pressure for development, battery storage, like solar. And then we also have the affordability of aging farmers and their retirement plans, and where young farmers and land transitions and business transitions all come into the conversation. We're price takers in commodity pricing. We don't always set our own prices. And when I think back to my grandfather being in the poultry industry, the market was cost plus. Now it's like the market price, and then they want it 40 cents back. And so I think about labor, farm worker housing. I also think about where the food system conversation comes in as a supplier to the food banks and with affordability. The food banks of New York State and nationwide are seeing increased pressure and increased need for capacity. So you see that there's these two tensions, right? About the cost of living, affordability, and access to nutrition. So there's so many conversations that we could have about agriculture. There's so many great opportunities. We showcase some of the largest apple orchards in the country. We have agritourism that families can enjoy because some families, they're trying to figure out how the next generation will keep the family farm going. And so you see this new increase of agritourism, but then you have on the flip side the regulations, the planning boards, the unknowns, the neighbor relations that come in with that, because not in my backyard. They might not want to be next to a thriving pumpkin patch with music and different things like that, or increased traffic. But people are looking for opportunities to enjoy their families, grow their families, make memories. So agriculture is this melting pot of all these unique issues, and we're personally going through an expansion where we're doubling in size. So I'm very familiar with National Grid. It was great to have you guys out, increasing our supply for energy so that we can have robots, automation, but also with manufacturing. As we bring in robots and automation, we have the aging infrastructure of like an egg grater, right? So we got a phone call recently that we will no longer be able to get service on our egg grater in 5 years. Grateful for the 5-year warning, but a new egg grater is about $4 million. And if you're importing that from Europe or Japan or wherever they're coming from, because they're not coming from inside the United States, that pulls in the conversation about tariffs and all these other things. So I'm looking forward to how we can have a thriving food system, one that's affordable, but also takes into consideration all these impacts. And so,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right, so I'm going to open it up because chances are you guys have eaten an egg before. You've certainly shopped at a grocery store or eaten food, hopefully before you got here today. You've probably bought and or sold a house. You certainly all pay utility bills. You enjoy the goods of manufacturing, even if you've never been involved. Everybody at this table has touched one of these industries in their regular life. What questions do you have for each other? As we were going around the table, who hit something that you're like, what did he mean by that? Or what did she mean by that? What do you guys got? Yeah.
For Christina. I read an article recently about the foreclosure in the American farm and the reluctance to turn over the keys to the next generation. And in some cases, these were multi-generational farms. Do you find that in our area? Is that prominent? I know it was a national article that I read, but I'm just curious.
So previously, I was the Young Farmer and Rancher Chair for New York Farm Bureau, which Onondaga County Farm Bureau is a member of New York Farm Bureau. So this transition plan that you see, it is, that is true. You might see someone who's worked on the family farm and maybe not been an owner, and then in their 60s, they inherit the family farm, and then they get to start being a decision maker. So as the family farm becomes more of a business, and you're managing all these different entities and regulations, be it transportation or you wear multiple hats throughout the day. So yes, that is something we see. But there are a lot of optimistic young farmers that are buying land or investing into the family business, or you'll find someone who's not in the family business, but they love agriculture, they love farming, and they become a partner. So you'll see that at some dairies where the next generation taking over isn't a family partner, but someone who's wants to build equity. So yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask some questions of the manufacturing sector, and I'm going to touch on a very topical subject, which is labor, but perhaps migrant labor. We talk a lot in the home building industry about workforce development, and we just concluded that we may not be able to get more out of our existing workforce. We're not going to develop the workforce fast enough locally, although it's nice to see that young people are reconsidering trades, reconsidering the opportunity to perhaps delay their education, get a more focused education after they've figured out what they want to do, as opposed to running right off to school. But I believe by and large that a lot of the people that come to our country and come to our region have a desire to do good things, and we're already seeing a lot of migrant workforce. You'll see them on your roofs, you'll see them on the siding jobs. They're starting to infiltrate the trades, and if they're taken care of well, they'll do a very good job. Do you see that in manufacturing? I believe if we start to build it, the workforce will migrate to us, just like they did to Charlotte and to Atlanta and to Las Vegas and to Houston, that it won't be long before the rumors become nationwide. Hey, there's something going on in upstate New York. Let's get over there and stake our claim. And I'm not sure if you're seeing that yet or if you're anticipating that.
Yeah, I would say we are anticipating a lot of individuals moving to our community. The numbers range between 100,000. I actually put the number much higher than that throughout regionally. I think it's going to be closer to 250,000 people moving here between, sort of greater upstate. And I will tell you that it has to do with opportunity. Where comes jobs, comes opportunity. So I do think, Dan, we'll see a significant number of people move here because of the opportunities, because of the great quality of life we have. And if we make it affordable and we make it attractive, people will want to be here, much like the companies have chosen to be here. Not only existing companies reinvesting, but new companies, an entirely new ecosystem. So I think part of it is how do we make sure it is an attractive place Kevin talked about that. How do we continue to lean into a growth agenda, which is different than an agenda which was maybe more sustainable or more flat in terms of its trajectory. So I think what we want to be is an attractive place to work and live, and we need to allow individuals who already live here to upskill. And I do think there's a growing trend of people moving into the trades, moving into skilled labor manufacturing jobs right out of high school or at any phase. I'll tell you, our apprenticeship programs now have individuals who are 18 years old, and we recently had someone just complete who's now a journey worker who's 71. There's no reason you can't transition to these jobs later in life, maybe a second or third career. So I think, Dan, that's part of the opportunity here. And I'm glad, by the way, you talked about a diverse housing stock. As we think about the thing that could stop us from growth, it would not be enough housing, and a variety of housing. So I'm glad you put that on the table, because we have to talk about a variety of housing. Also, Christine, I really appreciate you talking about agribusiness, because quite frankly, a lot of manufacturing is for agriculture. Some of the largest producers of both yogurt and milk and others are from this region and beyond. I mean, just look at east here. Chobani's adding a brand new facility. It could be, over $1.2 billion. Plus we've got, the Burn Dairies and many others who are currently expanding. So I think agribusiness is a part of the upstate experience, and another demonstration. So I do think all of these sectors need skilled labor. You also mentioned robots. I mean, let's be honest, cobots, AI-assisted production is a part of the future for all that we do. So I think that if leaning into both technology, smart use of technology, allows us to meet our needs, but we need to be an attractive place for people to move.
I think it's exciting that, people may migrate to an area for a variety of reasons. I think
Yes.
the best type of migration will be people that come here that want to give.
Yeah.
Not take, they want to
Yeah,
give. They
I
want to
agree
give
100%.
their work product. They want to come here because there's an opportunity. And so we'll get the best type of growth in our region, people that want to give back.
Yep, and I think they'll be international, not only from within the country, but globally. People will want to be here in upstate New York.
We talked about the Real Life Rosie, so that's bringing more women into manufacturing. You're talking about people coming to this region, including new Americans. I think that there's an opportunity to work with people who are homeless. Homelessness is a growing problem. There are more and more homeless families in central New York, in Onondaga County. There's a term, ALICE, asset limited, income constrained employed. So these are people who are employed and homeless. I think workforce training programs can really help those folks, and we can start to connect the dots. So we're paying collectively for them to be in homeless shelters or hotels, which means they're not potential customers for homes, homes in Eastwood, new homes. And I really liked your description of the pyramid. I think that's a helpful way to understand it. But there are ways to address multiple problems with solutions through workforce training. I think that veterans are another population with Fort Drum to the north, where we could set up programs that would enable vets coming off active duty to get jobs in central New York, to stay in central New York, to live here. And that's something that we're talking about and thinking about. So I think we need more, right? We do need more, and we're going to need more workers. And we're going to have to look for workers in places we haven't looked for them before.
Micron and other job creators would be wise to look back at what was done in the 40s and 50s, where it wasn't just government housing opportunities, there were private housing opportunities that were created by the manufacturers, the Kohlers, the automobile manufacturers. They created the housing opportunity because they knew that was a primary need of their workforce to get them there. So I don't know if they would ever consider that, but it doesn't have to be a government housing solution, it could be a private housing solution.
And what is the trick to driving that down? Because I thought the kind of 1-2 punch here on housing was a great illustration of how you see the lay of the land in CNY. They talked about what's not moving, how we're 40 years old when we're buying our first home, 21% I think you said is a first-time home buyer. So that part of the market, when you're talking about your workforce and who we want to recruit and stay in CNY, how do we is it just you're building the luxury homes, as you put it, Dan, and then the market is taking care of itself once you've built those? Or is it possible to build new affordable housing in New York?
It depends on the definition of affordable,
Yeah,
but
fair.
I think that there's, I think if somebody wanted to engage in buying a house, they can get their, they can go a long way just through educating themselves. We've just put, some of these obstacles are Pyrrhic. They can be overcome fairly easily just with some education. Young people have to learn to save. They need to learn to put the money aside for the deposit. They can't be apprehensive about home ownership. Oh my God, I got to take care of that house. They don't realize what a wealth generator it is. If they learn to have a relationship with a bank, a relationship with a mortgage lender, a relationship with a realtor, I think they feel overwhelmed. They feel overwhelmed with the idea of, well, I got to own that home. And so the ones that have probably succeeded have had good parental guidance or good family guidance or good mentorship saying, hey, we got to get you into a home. And then once they start on that path, they never leave it. It just may be a townhouse. It may be something very small and attainable, and next thing you know, they're on their way.
Well, I think, Dan, in many ways, the new starter homes are townhouses and condo opportunities or that kind of thing, because the cost is still an issue of building even, a relatively modest single-family home. And the reality is, as much as we talk about, an affordability issue relative to homeownership, comparing, we are still a relatively affordable, in the Syracuse region, we are still a relatively affordable housing market. We are below the national average still, although rising quickly, as you rightly pointed out, and that's a little scary. So these all sort of tie together. I think you're right on the education piece in terms of financial, financial literacy. But it is getting to a point where we are setting people up to be able to step into that home, to have the confidence to do that. And some of that literally starts with the education and the workforce programming that we're talking about, the change in the way we're approaching some of our K-12 education, with more of an emphasis on STEM and hands-on education, and recognizing that there are different paths to successful careers. I think we got away from that for a long time in New York. I think we're bending that in the right direction now, but it could use more emphasis still. There's a hunger for it. We have the first regional STEAM high school in the state here in Syracuse, and in year one, they got 25% more applicants than they were able to fill slots. So people see that there are opportunities in this space. We need to make sure that we have the slots to meet that demand, because those kids are going to be doing great. And we're talking about the Microns of the world. The Microns recognize that this project, which is now in the ground a couple of miles up the road, isn't going to be completed for 20 years. So certainly adult workforce they're paying attention to and bringing people into the region, but they're also paying attention to the fact that they're looking at kids who are just starting school right now, who are going to be potential employees. And we have needs in this space before they get here. We have an entire cluster of companies that are looking to grow, who need this demand. It is why we know we're going to have more folks moving into this region, even than we're seeing now, and why we have to be ready for that growth, and have to get out of the way of the growth. I can't emphasize that enough. Let Dan build houses.
Yeah.
Please, right? Let's attract folks in here who want to build multifamily, units, whether it's new townhouses, whether it's condos, whether it's some really attractive apartments. Let's first and foremost get out of the way of these things, because we know the need is there.
Well, and Randy said, let's not miss the moment. And I think you said timing is one of the issues that costs you a lot of money. Sure it does. How can the state improve timing in your industry?
We certainly find ways of getting in the way or creating obstacles. I think we've unlearned the ability to go fast. That seemed to happen since COVID. Since after COVID, all of a sudden, everything took longer, and we seemed to think that that was okay, whereas we always wanted to go fast. You know, back when Dave and I first got engaged in this industry, it wasn't uncommon to buy a house and be closed and in it in 30 days. And now you wouldn't dare tell anybody that. So on the closing end, just getting my building permit filed and approved. So just a lot of regulatory burden. And some of it, honestly, is constrictions with the workforce. I can tell you that I build the only product, and perhaps Dave sells one of the only products, that if you buy today, you can't have tomorrow. Everybody wants it tomorrow. And when I've met with my clients and we've decided what we're going to build and we've agreed on the price, all that goes out the window because the very next day they say, when can I have it? When can I have it? When can I have it? And I can't get it together soon enough. So one of the things that we've appreciated and enjoyed as builders over the last 3 or 4 years, and we hope we continue to do, is as soon as we build it, it'll be occupied, it'll be sold, and we'll keep going. And I think we can retrain ourselves to go quicker and accelerate. So I think better is yet to come in that area. But there's so much regulatory burden. Dave and Jared hinted on this. And, you know, for the first time in my career, people are listening. The state of New York is listening, and we're hearing now whether we can collectively solve the problem. We'll see, but people are listening, and that's encouraging.
I think, Dan, one of the things that you're touching on that I'm going to say we were pleased to see that the governor is taking a step in this direction is on things like seeker reform. Yep. But you notice the way I just described it. It's a step in the right direction. We see that there are, you know, when you start to read the fine print, there are a number of things in there that will keep it from having its sort of best possible impact here in the region. So, for example, it'll only apply to developments on previously disturbed land.
What is previously disturbed land? Nobody knows.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? I mean, it just means, right? So, okay, so they already built something there, great. Does that mean that in many cases, if you're going into an old site, that you then no longer have to deal with the brownfield requirements? I don't think so. That doesn't sound right. But up here, where Dan wants to build, how do we streamline that? Yeah. Right? How do we streamline this process, whether it's dealing with wetlands or other environmental approvals? Certainly among our members, and again, we're focusing on housing, but it's really any number of different issues or opportunities that we're looking at. Streamlining approvals, making them not only the process faster, but making it more transparent and predictable. You're going to have to do A, B, C, D, and E. Boom. Okay. Let's make that really clear. Exactly what it is. Because Dan will do that if he knows exactly what it is, and then you'll get a response in X amount of time. If we can get that, we've come a long way.
Wetlands have come up a number of times, so I want to make some points because I think we're all learning from one another here, and you'll take some of this discussion away with you and you'll spread the word. Up until recently, we had a volume of 1 million acres of mapped wetlands in New York State. So it was very easy. We could look at a map, we'd say, there they are. Maybe the lines were a little blurred, and occasionally we had to clarify the lines. A lot of this impetus for the regulation change came after about a 30-year battle that the federal government had with developers over what a federal wetland was. And a lot of the regulation that came from the federal government was taken from it when it was finally determined that a wetland that is isolated, if it doesn't connect throughout state lines, then that will no longer be regulated by the feds. And I would say careful what you ask for, because as challenging as that was, we knew where the boundary was. We identified the wetland. We honored it. I didn't want to build in a wetland anyway. It's not going to be a good house. I can't put a road on a wetland. I can't put a house on a wetland, but I could avoid it. Well, then what happened is once the state or the feds relinquished the ability to have that their jurisdiction, the state decided, well, now we're going to step in. We have a suspicion that there's more than 1 million acres of wetland out there. We're going to find out how much more wetland there is. And there may be more wetland. And again, if the volume doubles, we still don't want to build in the wetland area. But the state of New York requires a 100-foot buffer around the wetland. So the very wetland that the feds had jurisdiction over for decades didn't require a buffer. Now all of a sudden we have to stay 100 feet away from it. So it's not just the wetland we have to avoid, it's all the adjacent area, and that will double or triple or quadruple the volume. And it's just the geometry and the shape. The wetlands don't come in neat little boxes or rectangles on the corner of your property, they cut through the middle. And so all those challenges, I would ask the state to tell me why the 100-foot buffer is necessary. It's like the municipality that requires a 20-foot easement to put a sewer line in suddenly says it has to be 100 feet wide. Why? Why does it have to be 100 feet wide? So it's an overreach, and I don't know if it's an overreach the state's interested in correcting or not.
I can put that in real life. Recently, last year, I sold a little over 93 acres in Camillus to a builder developer, and lo and behold, it went way longer than it should. Unexpected wetland delineation survey in addition to additional expenses that the individual buyer did not figure, and the time frame thereof. You know what's going to happen. It's going to be reflectively put into the cost of the lots, which are high to begin with, as Dan and I have been saying, because everything starts with land, and then you put the house on it. So it's all reflective. I know he wasn't expecting, the buyer, wasn't expecting the cost overrides of the expense of the property and the time that it took, because it took about 4 extra months longer than expected. And when it comes to development, time is money.
Yeah, I clarify, we're not interested in obliterating wetlands. Wetlands
No.
need to be protected, they serve a purpose. We're just talking about the overreach of the adjacent area.
Right.
It's just unnecessary to put that additional regulatory burden. It's almost like, if a developer can show you with his development plan that I can come up to within a foot of that wetland and none of the stormwater that we runoff that we create will get to it, why is it any less protected than if I stay 100 feet away?
Or 800 foot away from a seasonal creek, the definition of a creek. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be readdressed and confirmed.
I think we have a lot of, people have their areas of expertise, whether it's in the building code or whether they're in environmental protection, and they're very protective of their area of expertise and maybe not willing to show any compromise for perhaps another area that we'd like to create or develop or grow. So if you just give us a little latitude on the wetland, we assure you it'll be protected, it'll be monitored, but we shouldn't have to give up those construction opportunities or those, because it's going to affect manufacturing projects. These gentlemen are going to invite people to come into the region and build their facility, and all of a sudden they're going to have a conversation about the wetland.
Well, I think it was Kevin talked about regulatory certainty, and here's two guys in the business that have been at it for a while, and you asked some really great questions. Well, why? And does this count? And what even is this stream? I think you illustrated the point of regulatory certainty pretty well, and that needs to be in the mix. What else? What am I missing?
Yeah, I think that's, this is a great conversation because it's the right time to be asking these questions. If you're in a growth environment, what gets in the way? How do we move quicker and still, like you were saying, Dan, respect the requirements that we want to have anyway? And it's, and I think there's an openness. I know you're talking about it, Senator, and many others are talking about how do we move fast? Can we relearn how to go fast? Because there was a time you mentioned, and we did it for decades, and we needed to do it as economic growth came about. Now it's a new time of economic growth, economic investment. Let's figure out how we relearn how to go fast again, and do so. We have so many more tools today, and so many more opportunities today. So let's do that well. But I think as goes housing, as goes development, as goes investment, everything from all kinds of infrastructure. Over you talked about our energy infrastructure, which has to be invested in. I mean, the reality is this is our moment. Let's figure out how we speed investment, but do so responsibly. No one here has said let's not be responsible. So I welcome this conversation. I hope it's the same conversation we'll be having. We actually have an advocacy day. We'll be talking about this next week. Let's not miss our moments of investment, of growth, because I think it's one of the most exciting times to be in New York, maybe ever. And I think upstate has a particular opportunity, along with downstate, to learn about what can become.
I love the conversation that was alluded to about nuclear power. So in another life, and Senator knows this, I was a nuclear submariner. And following World War II, this country had a nuclear submarine force that exceeded 100 submarines. So if we can generate 100 submarines in 2 or 3 decades' time, why can't the country generate 100 nuclear power plants in 2 or 3 decades' time to service our energy needs?
Yep, and we would second that. I think the reality is that new nuclear is really what we'll need in order to fulfill the energy needs of the current industry and future needs. It is the cleanest energy available, and it's immediate, and it's on 24/7, which we need. And so I think the reality is it's time for us as a country. I'm glad we're in this conversation. And I was just in Canada looking at the SMRs and what Ontario's done with the nuclear space and their growth. I think we can learn globally as well as be leaders in the new nuclear space. So I think that's got to be a part of our mix of the energy of the future. We have a lot of capability in our region.
I think Senator and I, we were talking earlier before we started about creative options in housing
Yeah.
and meeting the need for first-time home buyers
And options for seniors.
Sure.
and option for seniors.
So they can move too.
The two things that we really, really need to focus on.
Yeah.
And what we've done with the builder that I've represented for 34 of my 37 years, we went back to a village, Jordan, I don't have a problem mentioning that. It took roughly 6 to 7 meetings, but we got them agree to fulfill a need, which would be for smaller housing. Now, why smaller housing? Smaller price, because everything's predicated outside of the cost of the land, what the square footage is, and of course, what you put in it. They did agree, and we ended up with homes that were 600 square foot, which was under what they would require, but they were good about it. I think our county exec had a little say and help with that, and the governor's push for affordability certainly had some push with that. And they have full basements to them, so it could go to 1,200. And whenever you do additional square footage in a lower level, Dan will tell you this, it's considerably less the cost than adding it on to the first and or second floor. And a lot of these families can grow into what they feel is affordable, but at least they're getting in under 300,000 for new construction. No one that I know locally can do 280, 275, and new construction. It's a hard animal to produce, but this was a means to do it. So we just got to get a little more creative and meet the needs.
Senator, for your sake, and Kevin, the cost of a new home, 20 to 25% of that is the land. So that's something that if you tucked away, it's basically 20 to 25%. So the $400,000 home I build be on a lot that's $80 to $100 to $125,000. And so when we try to bring our price down, the first thing we try to tackle is how can we get more utility out of that? How can we make the lot smaller? If I can have 4 lots per 100 foot of road instead of 2 lots per 100 foot of road, now I can cut the cost of those lots down considerably, and that'll go directly to the consumer and what they pay for their house.
And inversely, and I know you've run into resistance to this approach from some local folks, but inversely, when you think about it, if you're able to build those 4 houses, you're certainly making better use of the infrastructure supporting those houses, but you're also producing more revenue for the municipality where you're building them, right? Over time, those 4 houses are together should help keep the tax rate lower, but also produce more gross revenue to come to the municipalities.
When I go to these towns and I try to make the intellectual argument as to why you should give me what I want, it always comes off as I'm being self-serving, I'm just finding a way to manipulate them, and they just don't want to hear the arguments. If I make narrow, small lots, you're getting more tax dollars per lineal foot of road that you need to maintain and infrastructure that you need to maintain than anywhere else in your town. And I think ultimately maybe the political body hears the message, but they don't have the conviction to give me the decision in light of the residents that are in the community. Because I hear things like, well, when I drive down the street and I see the houses so close together, I don't like the way that looks. By the way, we call that in our business friction. When you drive down a road and you're inclined to go slower because you want to admire what you see, the houses are a little closer together and you look at what they look like, that's a good thing. It keeps the traffic down. And I think to myself, well, what are you driving down that street for anyway? Stay off that street, go to your house, because the people that live there, that bought these houses, they're happy to drive down that street. And one of the board members said to me, well, Dan, if we give you what you want, what are you offering to us? And I said, I'm offering an opportunity for 80 new residents to live in your wonderful community. Don't you like your community? Yes. Well, don't you want anybody else to live here? No, not really. And that's usually the sentiment that I get, which is very disappointing.
Yeah, interesting.
I was just going to say that my husband and I live in an 864 square foot home in Lakeland, and we love our small lot because it allows us to, go out to eat, travel, and, do other things that are important to us as a dual income, no children household. But it also creates the opportunity to, have children in the future because childcare and all these other costs. So like we're able to use it as an investment now for our goals in the future. So I would just be a strong advocate for small, affordable housing. So it's great to live in a little neighborhood like that. So I wanted to.
Alberto said, he said it
Yeah.
never felt small to him.
Yeah, it's great. We can walk
maybe you
over to
were
the school. Yeah, so
Christina had good mentorship.
Lakeland,
yeah, Lakeland.
we started a project in Lakeland 32 years ago. And it was a home that we marketed a home that grows. And ironically, we kind of sort of brought that principle back in the Jordan track, but a little different because we had to go down instead of up. But the principle back then was almost like what they did post-World War II. You'll see a lot of this in Westvale. They were capes that allowed you to go to a second floor, but basically it was a one floor. And then when your family grew, you finished the second floor. We took the principle in the Jordan track, but as I said, we had to go down because lower level square footage is way more affordable than going out or up. But it's interesting that we started it in Lakeland.
Yeah, I think we will need these new housing solutions. We need to talk more about them. The times have changed. It's nice to bring back these concepts, these ideas. We'll need it for workforce housing, it's already been mentioned. We'll need it for new employer who will come here. We'll need it for existing people who want to move in this pyramid of housing. I know Kevin talks about it a lot. A lot of others do in this community. It will require a mindset change. I call it a paradigm change. It's time for some paradigm changes to be the growth community I think we now can be. I think conversations like this help us get there. It will take some time as we readjust to a world that's changed, but I think it's the right place to go.
I have a question for Dave and Jared. Can you speak on to rent prices? So for those people who aren't buying their first home and they're waiting until their 40s, what are individuals or families seeing in the rental market?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak statewide. A lot of pressures on rent really, we would say stems from the housing inventory. So you have a shortage of availability of townhomes and other multifamily units. That is the same you're seeing in apartments. Folks in rentals, they don't have that mobility because there's nowhere else really to go, or they like where they are right now, so they sit. That doesn't open up any other available units. There's also rising pressures on housing providers. They have increased costs and property taxes and maintenance and utilities. So you're seeing pressures on the housing provider. That is ultimate, and then you're seeing no inventory, so that is driving up rent, and then it's also driving up costs for the housing provider that will be passed down as increases in rent just to, keep the even, because a lot of times these properties are investment properties. It's their retirement. They put a lot of effort, time, and money into these properties. They are, just trying to maintain that at a reasonable price. So unfortunately, yeah, I think higher rents isn't effective of the overall problem.
We are seeing locally higher rents. Of course we are. They can't find a home, they're going to get into a rent. But one thing that we're absolutely firm and strong on, we are opposing good cause eviction. We do not feel that that is the answer for tenants in affordable housing. And this isn't just locally, this is across our state. In fact, there's a public hearing in Syracuse tomorrow night that yours truly and our association and members will be there because they're going to be voting on the 23rd on this.
Dave and Jared, I have an intuition. I don't know that market area, but I think the pendulum of the challenges that landlords have to deal with to own apartment complexes or rental units have swung too far in favor of the tenant. And I think if many of them have probably made the decision, well, I'll just build a high-priced luxury product. Because the people that can afford to pay the most, the people that have the best credit ratings, are not people I'm going to have a problem having to evict or having the court system weigh against me. So I think because of all this public policy going in the way of good cause eviction or things like that, your producers are just saying, well, I just won't produce that product.
I would agree.
We would say, it's a difficult issue, rising rents. Good cause eviction, rent control, rent stabilization laws, local or statewide, or local rent stabilization laws, they don't create a single unit of housing. So that would be where we would really like to distinguish. They are a short-term fix to rising rents, but in the long term, it is damaging, I think, the tenant. It's harmful to the tenant, it's harmful to the property owner. It does not create any additional housing. It incentivizes tenants to stay where they are, where they're not moving to maybe a larger apartment, or they're not moving into home ownership. So that unit then remains locked. And if you're not building additional units, that is, I think, a contributing factor to the housing inventory shortage that we're experiencing now. So our association does not believe that those are solutions to our current state of affairs.
The solution is more. This does not get us to more. And I agree. I think that's an important piece.
The only incentive is for the investor not to get involved into, especially the smaller landlords. And the smaller landlords that we know, that we're familiar with, that we have conversations with daily, just about, their rents are decent. In fact, because they have good tenants, they keep their rents reasonable. They don't bring them high. We've mentioned it to city council and across the state too, in conversations, codes, and go after the bad landlords. We're agreeable for that, okay? This property shouldn't look like this. No one should own it and let it, not be suitable for anyone to live there. But when you're capping off rents and you're discouraging investors, especially mom and pop investors, small time investors, from wanting to be involved in being landlords, that's not a good thing. It's not. I literally have clients that want to get out of all the properties, and they've owned many through the years, strictly because of what they feel may happen with good cause eviction and initiating perpetual leases.
And you're going to see a lot more corporate ownership of these units or buildings. So I don't think that's to the benefit of a community or tenants either.
Senator, we've touched a lot on housing, I think appropriately so, because it's certainly one of the things in the moment that we're in. I
It
think
became the thing.
It is, well, it really is one of those things when people say, what keeps you up at night? This is certainly on that.
Alberto's the
on that
happiest about
The
that.
short list. Well, interesting that you mentioned that, because the next thing I was going to say is something almost blasphemous at a hearing on affordability, that we haven't talked about the things we really need to spend money on. And that goes to infrastructure, because if we want to have a level of affordability as we are in a growth mode, we cannot emphasize enough the need to use this moment to invest in our infrastructure in this region. We talk a lot about shovel-ready sites. Well, what does that mean? Certainly there is a push in making sure that a site is prepared, but it's got the appropriate level of electric and gas access, water, wastewater. We go through the whole list. And then you look at the state of those, as Alberto alluded to in his comments. We've got, and I get to say this because it was in NYSEG RG&E territory, not National Grid, because this would not happen to National Grid. We're dealing with a situation, for example, over in the Auburn area, where they literally have had to turn away projects to build new housing because they said we simply can't meet the energy need for that. We're hearing some more of this in the Rochester area too. And you look at some of the costs associated with addressing that, and they're enormous, to essentially rebuild substations that have by and large not been touched since were built in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and haven't been touched. And we've gotten away with that for a long time because we haven't had growth. And so the demand never went up, and you just sort of keep it limping along. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a growth mode that says, I need more energy, right? It's the time to invest in that now. Because it's not going to be cheaper to invest in it next year or the year after. And all of the other factors that we're talking about, the ability to attract high-intensity energy users in spaces like semiconductors and microelectronics, the ability to build the housing that we're going to need for the 100,000 plus people that we know are coming to this region much faster than we realize. Believe it or not, spending money in these spaces is going to be key to affordability over the course of the next generation for us. And we should not shy away from that. We should be bold in assessing what we need, attacking it further on the front end than the back end, because waiting brings not only the additional direct capital costs, but a lot of opportunity costs that we could avoid.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin, because we need all forms of that infrastructure, like the wastewater. We need water itself. We'll need energy systems. All of that, the infrastructure, road systems, all those things need to be invested in now, and we need to have that go quickly too. Back to speed of investment. Every industrial and/or agribusiness is looking for, do you have those critical components? Housing, obviously, really important for individuals and to come here and live here and to prosper here. But the infrastructure needs to be in place, and we haven't been through a spree of spending in that space for decades. Now is the time, and those are some of the best investments we can make as a state. And there's more and more talk about it, more emphasis on it. But we would agree with Kevin on that. And that needs to be done statewide, but especially here in Central New York with so much growth to be projected. Let's not wait to continue to make those investments. We used to talk about winter and construction season. Expect construction season to be year-round. And we need to embrace that. So put your GPS on, figure out how you're going to get to work or where you're going today, because that's going to be the new norm, I think, and that'll be a good thing. That's what a growth community needs to be prepared to do. But let's make it smart growth. Let's make sure we continue to embrace the kinds of growth we've had in the past. People don't realize we have one of the greenest, by some measures, the greenest grid in the country. We need to continue to double down on that. We can do that with new nuclear. We can do that with continued focus on greening our energy. But having said that, we also need all the above forms of doing that. So I do think this is the moment to make those investments. I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin.
We're starting to look at a lot of that, just understanding that the regulatory compact for utilities, especially electric and gas utilities, is that the asset has to be used and useful when it gets built. And so it's not the movie, if you build it, they will come. It's you come, and then we'll build it. The challenge is when we get into a growth economy and speed to market is the premium, then you look at the process of building it, whether it's a generation asset or a transmission asset or a distribution asset. You look at the regulatory environment you're into, which hasn't been calibrated for growth. And you say to yourself, well, even if you tell a utility executive, we got your back, you build it, and we'll make sure that you and your investors, your bondholders and your shareholders will be fairly rewarded for the use of their capital. The challenge is, well, if you don't change everything else, if you don't change the regulatory environment, if you don't change the market environment, it's not going to change. We had your utility, your nuclear forum in Fulton last week, and we had our friend from the Nuclear Energy Institute there talking about new nuclear, and we talked about utility boardrooms, right? And the reality of a utility CEO saying, I got an idea. I'm going to borrow $10 billion and build a nuclear power plant. Now, that hasn't happened in our current generation. For that to happen, you have to create an environment for him or her to say that, what are you going to do to help me manage the risk of borrowing that money? And the regulatory environment, the understanding that there's the full process of not just building the asset, but building the transmission, building the distribution, having a buyer for the electricity that's willing to make a commitment, not putting the burden of those costs to all ratepayers if it's being built for specific purposes. And so that's the challenge that we face in the utility business is, it's, and then you layer on top of that for us, that's looking forward. We have to maintain and operate what's still there. And our former CEO would love to tell a story about going into a substation in Buffalo and seeing the nameplate on the substation saying 1921, right? And he said two things went through his mind. God bless the engineer that built me a substation that's lasted 100 years, and I own and operate a 100-year-old substation. And that's the dichotomy that we face in our industry, is that we have to invest in that and those assets all along. And lastly, we had this experience in some of our eastern suburbs. Your electric and gas assets are operated and maintained with continuous investment. Some of our other utility brothers and sisters, they have, well, largely because they have to go before public bodies like municipal governments to get the funding, have more of a run-to-fail model, right? You run the gas, you run the water line until it breaks, and then you fix it. And if people are going to be without water for 2 or 3 weeks, well, that's the cost of not continually investing in that infrastructure. That's not a model that we've been allowed to pursue. And Randy's right. The reason that we've been allowed, the fact that we've been allowed to invest in the infrastructure makes us attractive from a reliability perspective two industries to come here. So you can, you want reliability, you're going to have to pay for it, but it's better than the alternative of power outages. I'll just talk briefly about bills, Senator, because I know it's on everybody's mind. A couple things. One, there are three things that have impacted the increase in bills. One, the cost of the supply has gone up tremendously. The commodity costs have gone up over 30% year over year, natural gas costs. And the reason why natural gas is so relevant is natural gas is not only is it the primary fuel for space heating in New York State, where it's available, but it's also the primary fuel for electric generation in New York State. Somewhere between 55 and 65% of the electricity that's generated today, every day in New York State is through the use of natural gas. And so when natural gas prices go up, they not only affect people who are doing space heating for natural gas, but they're also affecting electricity prices. And that's had a significant impact. Demand is up significantly. Our winter's running somewhere between 15 and 20% colder than last year. We just came off a record, I think 40 days in a row. It didn't go north of 30 degrees for 20 days in a row. It didn't get out of the teens. That generates a lot of usage. A lot of usage generates more delivery, and that drives up bill. And lastly, the point I made earlier about the need to continue to invest in infrastructure. We're now into the second year of a three-year rate agreement. The delivery costs have gone up because it's more expensive, because we have to pay taxes, we have to buy poles, we have to buy diesel, we have to pay labor. But that's somewhere in the 8 to 10% range. If I can say with reasonable confidence that if we didn't have a 30% spike in commodity prices and a 20+% spike in demand, we would that 10% percent related increase in delivery costs would be relevant, but wouldn't be driving 8.5 to 90% of the calls to your office. And so, and then lastly, our bill has become the collection agency for a lot of issues in New York State. Regulatory issues, policy-driven issues, the subsidy of technology that may or may not be in the market, taxes. Over half of our bill goes to support costs that we don't control, costs that we don't have any, and when you layer on the supply aspects, it's even more. I'll guarantee you we're not perfect, I guarantee you that. But we go through a very rigorous process to set our rates. There's a lot of if we had the transparency.
I'm sorry, some of those charges on your bill are fixed. They're kind of a per bill charge.
Right.
Others, obviously, like the property tax that you talked about, like that's pretty stable. That's going to be a fixed charge on a bill. But you compare that to sales tax, well, the more you use, the more sales tax you're also paying.
Right. And
so if the commodity's gone up 30%
and
there's more demand, you're also paying more sales tax, just by way of example. Right?
And in some
Am I understanding that correctly?
And in some communities, gross receipts tax. The percentage of system benefit charges and others go up as the usage goes up. But our bill has become a policy-driven bill as well as a service-related bill, and that's the reality of where we are. But it's a challenge, especially when you see significant when you get the supply-demand combination happening to the bill, and it's happening to everyone. We recognize both individual homeowners, municipalities. One of the really the hidden challenges. It's kind of funny because we talk about all the taxes we pay, and then municipalities want to say, well, our bill has gone up. One of the real challenges Of the various market segments that are challenged, municipalities is one of them. Because, as you know, municipalities set their budget for the year. The DPW commissioner and the buildings and grounds commissioner will say, okay, here's how much I'm projecting to spend on electricity and natural gas. And when these spikes happen, you've got to go back in front of a public body and say, remember I told you I needed 1.2 million for the year for utilities? Well, I may just need 1.5 million. That's $300,000 that the town or village or city didn't plan on, so you're not going to open a pool, you're not going to open a skating rink, you're going to do a little something else to find that money, or dip into reserves if you're fortunate to have those.
Alberto, I have a question. If our population in our region grows considerably in your service territory, will the rapid growth of users have a deflating effect on the cost per user of your product or an inflating effect?
Yeah. It's a great question. The reason that National Grid is in the economic development business, and we have robust economic development programs, is to increase the denominator, getting more customers using the same amount of assets. And so when you increase the denominator, the per unit cost goes down. So the theory says to us, Dan, that more customers means lower per unit cost, okay? What breaks that model is, what has the potential to break that model is the large loads that we see in front of us that will require massive infrastructure investment to meet those large loads. Down the street, we're fortunate because we're pretty close, and so what the ripple effect of that investment will be on customers for other system upgrades will probably be relatively modest. But as we start to talk about data centers, AI, those types of very significant, 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt loads, and you have to build bespoke assets to support that load, that's where we have to have serious conversations on what are we going to do to pay for that. So your 80-house subdivision, the substation is going to handle it, and everything upstream will be able to handle that. But the 500 megawatt data center that those people are going to work at is a different story that we have to think
So
about.
if I think this through, if you put a multi-billion-dollar capital improvement in an already well-populated area, you're spending the money on the improvement without the ability to increase the denominator. If we spend the money here and there's plenty of opportunity to grow and backfill with population, that will hopefully help the denominator.
Yeah, and that's, we're not, I mean, the wastewater people and the freshwater people say the county will show you maps. Here's, that, here's where we want you to build, because here's where the sewers are, here's where the freshwater is. We have the same thing.
I commend our governor for affordable housing initiative, and I do. I caution the one step forward but two step back approach that, this is me personally, looks to see. I know that until the court's decision of the all-electric, which I think was a good decision to put on hold, my question to Alberto would be, would we have been ready from an electrical point of view, not to put you on the spot, if that did go through and or if it does go through and the courts don't kill it?
Yeah. Dave, the answer to that question is, exists in two parts. One is, put your finger on the map and tell me, and I can tell you whether we would have been ready there, right? And that's the challenge. It's not unlike the electric bus debate, which you could just separate the technology perspective. People will say, well, the school districts, the network won't support it. Well, tell me which school district, and I can tell you whether they can do it or not. Having said that, the supply has, we are in a net negative situation in terms of the last 3 or 4 years of how much generation we've retired versus how much has come online, simply from the supply perspective. The growth in renewables, both land-based and offshore, has nowhere kept pace with what was anticipated. So there's going to be stress on the generation side. That's going to drive up market prices. That's sort of the macro answer. The macro answer is we need more electricity. And so the micro answer is it's really a town-by-town, county-by-county question, because there are some areas where we probably have a capacity to put in assets, and there's others that we would have to build significant assets to meet that demand. Having said that, we already have natural gas capacity, and the natural gas capacity to grow in some parts of our state, and we need it in others. And so continue to invest in a robust natural gas network will be essential all the way. I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The electrification of transportation is going to happen. The move towards the more electrification of technology, space heating is going to happen. But the pace and the availability of the technology and balancing the costs and the impact on an economy is going to be the challenge.
Yeah, and to the governor's credit and her administration, I think her all of the above approach, I think, is a thoughtful approach, and we will, see where that takes us.
The all of the above approach is necessary. What was talked about prior to the growth and investment happening 5 years later is dramatically different energy portfolio, different timelines, which were flat energy projections and now become hockey pucks, depending on where you're at in the state of New York. So I think we need to respond to the moment. And I think that, being responsive while continuing to move forward with green goals seems to be the best approach. So I do think we all have to be cognizant of what investments are being made and how do we make them. But I would agree, the all of the above approach is going to be the most productive, long-term, actually make our grid continue to be greener. And like Alberto said, over time, technology, electrification will continue to take hold, but that should be driven by adoption and technology. Rigid deadlines and requirements are very difficult in a fast-growing environment, and I think we all can acknowledge that. That's probably true of most things we're now talking about today versus 5 years ago.
And I don't think any of this exists in a vacuum. If you look at General Motors, Ford, Stellantis,
Yeah.
their balance sheets have taken a tremendous hit because they made a bet on electric vehicles that the market said not yet. The market didn't say no, the market's going to get there because people are going to realize it, but they said not yet. And so when you see that happening, lawmakers, I think, pay attention, that say, well, that's General Motors. That's not Dave and Al's bike shop. And so if they made a mistake and they're willing to take that hit, then we need to recognize that it's where we're going to get there. I don't have any doubt, but the pace and issues of reliability, issues of fuel sources, the use of natural gas, the use of nuclear, and the growth in renewables it's all going to be part of the mix. And then just let's make a pitch but you got to get it to the meter, right? Just building it isn't enough. You got to get it to the meter, and that is another issue of cost and building it and regulatory reform and things like that.
Well, listen, thank you all. Your presence obviously is appreciated, but the frank conversation and the back and forth was really fun for me to sit and listen. You all brought great ideas and you were prepared with them, but also I really appreciated the crosstalk and the conversation. What I'm walking away with, and you never know if this is going to be a total gripe session where you're just complaining about taxes and fees in New York State, and we hit on some of those things, but what I'm walking away with is how optimistic this table is about the future of CNY, that you're ready to grow, and you don't want to miss the moment, that this is a key moment for investment in infrastructure. Creating some regulatory certainty in New York State is going to be key, and that the state needs to allow you to move faster in order to meet that moment. Also, we touched on the next generation, all the way down to financial literacy and how that conveys into generational wealth, which I thought was an interesting touch point, as well as taking them forward into workforce development, and how when you're pairing these things up, that can create that wealth while they're getting a home. You're building it for them, you're selling it. So you got to see kind of the whole generation and providing options for seniors that are affordable so that they can move out of the homes and open up the market as well. So I thought you did a great job on touching a lot of things in your industry, but also understanding what affordability looks like when you just consider like a high school kid in central New York, maybe one of Jared's kids, and what their opportunity looks like in the next generation here. And I can kind of see, and not to pick on you, but I can kind of see how you thought through, this is how we're going to provide this next generation, and we don't want to miss this moment here. And it's left me feeling pretty optimistic for central New York, actually. So I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you for meeting the moment here and for having such a constructive dialogue with me. I really appreciate it.
Senator, thank you.
Thanks, guys.